Cyberpunk 2077 isn't the hardest game in the world, especially by the end when you've maxed out your cyberware and the level cap, but what that means is that most builds are viable. And in this video, I'm going to be showing a build inspired by everyone's favorite a-hole from Team Fortress 2, the Scout.
I'm a freaking blur here! No. Top now, hon! Say goodbye to your kneecaps, chucklehead! Hey, I'm flying!
For the uninitiated, TF2 is a first-person class-based shooter released by Valve in 2007. Along with a very unique art style, they made each class an individual character with a specific personality and appearance rather than some generic-looking soldiers. This resulted in 9 distinct and instantly recognizable classes. While TF2 wasn't the first class-based shooter game, it's widely credited for inspiring the hero shooter subgenre. Maybe you know TF2 as that goofy game with a lot of hats, or the game that recently suffered a major bot crisis. But over 17 years later, the game is still alive and well with a community as passionate as any. This is an especially fitting crossover since the Team Fortress 2 characters are also career mercenaries, and Scout is the most obvious candidate because of the double jump provided by the reinforced tendon cyberware. While I will be providing a loose build plan, by no means do you have to follow it. We're adapting Scout to the 2077 universe after all, so if you feel like creating your own or modifying this one, then by all means do that. I'm going to be breaking this video down into 3 main parts, so if you feel like only incorporating one part of this build into a playthrough you're already doing, then feel free to skip ahead to wherever you like. First, we're going to be covering cosmetics, then weapons, and finally the skill tree and cyberware. This build also uses the Phantom Liberty expansion, which includes some extra cosmetics, as well as raising the level cap from 50 to 60. So before even getting to the build, I take it most people are more interested in looking like the Scout. Unfortunately, you can't achieve much without mods, although I did try my best, so I'll include the best vanilla fit I could make. But as for the modded appearance, as you can see, you can get a pretty damn good look. All of these are running with the latest 2.21 update. We're also going to be needing Equipment EX. This allows you to equip more than the usual amount of cosmetics by adding a lot of additional equip slots. All of these mods will be linked in the description, and also make sure to check each mod for requirements before installing. Let's start at the top. The Scout has a hat and headset combo which we are able to emulate with the following 2 mods. These work for both male and female Vs. The first is a recolor of the baseball cap. You just want to get the black one from this set. Then we want to get the Peltor Comtac tactical headset. Now for some reason the hat sometimes doesn't render when you switch to third person, such as riding on a motorcycle, so if you don't like that, I recommend using a hat from the base game called the Bitch V13 cap. Unfortunate name, but it's the closest to an all-black hat. For the shirt, I found a fairly identical looking one for male V, but female V doesn't have this one, so I opted for this one instead. You want to select the red and blue shirts from each of these. For the legs, there's a perfect pair of cargo pants available for both Vs, although they are separate mod files. Then you can get this sock pack as well. It might clip a little with the pants, but overall looks good. Then for shoes, I found the Icon American Synfibers from the base game work pretty well. So for simplicity, might as well use these. If you haven't already, install the vanilla virtual clothing Atelier and you can simply buy these from any computer in the game instead of hunting them down in a store. For the hands, we have some boxing wraps, which is pretty much exactly what the Scout wears. For the bag, female V comes ahead as she gets access to a set of accessories converted from a bunch of NPCs. With this mod, you can get the bag worn by Claire to complete your ensemble. Male V unfortunately has no such option, so I used the sling from Phantom Liberty, the black anodized protective magazine chest holster. Just like with the shoes, use the vanilla clothing Atelier and you can simply buy this from any computer. And that completes the modded look. Now here's the sad vanilla look. This is about as good as it gets, although if you manage to come up with something better, let me know. For the cap, we're going with the Arasaka cap with camera or the Trauma Team cap with headset. The Arasaka hat can be bought at Jinguji and the Trauma one at the Westwind vendor in Pacifica. After scouring the Ateliers, I don't believe there is a good reddish colored t-shirt in the game. This was the closest I could find. Blue fares a bit better with 2 options, but I think this one works the best, which is the Cushion Polymer foam t-shirt from Phantom Liberty. Looks good for both Vs and can be bought from David Walker at the Dogtown Stadium. And David happens to sell the sling that we use on Male V in the modded section, so go ahead and look for that here too. For the pants, I went with the simple Yoros. They can be bought from the vendor in Kabuki. Finally, for the shoes, you can use the same Icon America Synfibers. These can be found at the vendor in Northside. And yeah, that's about it for vanilla. I tried. I'm gonna be doing the weapons next because understanding what weapons we're gonna be using will make the perk selection make more sense later on. In TF2, each class has 3 weapon slots, a primary, a secondary, and a melee. Conveniently, in Cyberpunk you can also equip 3 weapons at a time. For primaries, the scout uses a variety of shotguns. He has low health but high mobility, making him an elite close-range duelist and an excellent flanker. There's no better weapon for a hit-and-run style of gameplay, so naturally we'll be using shotguns too. Finding certain weapons can be a bit of a challenge, so when you're starting out I would say just use any shotgun you have. But let's take a look at all the shotguns in the game. We're going to be ruling out the smart shotguns because we're not going to be using SmartLink. So the L69 and DB4 Palica are out. Next we're going to eliminate the pump action since Scout doesn't use any in TF2. So the Carnage, Tactician, and the iconic versions of them are also out. But we're actually going to allow Rebecca's shotgun because it has a unique knockback effect like the Scout's Force of Nature. The only drawback is that it's classified as a heavy weapon, meaning you'll have reduced movement speed and jump height while using it. But it always spawns in the same spot, making it easy to get for any playthrough. So this is what we're left with. I'm personally okay with keeping the auto shotgun since all of Scout's primaries fire pretty fast. But if you feel it's too far of a departure, then you can stay away from those too. My personal favorites have been the standard double barrel and the Satara. For secondaries, the Scout primarily uses a pistol. In TF2 they are all fast firing, but I wouldn't be a stickler about it and just use any pistol you like. Revolvers might be too far out though. Personally, I like the Lexington, and you get an iconic version called Dying Knight very early in the game, so you can just rock with that for a while. He also has a throwable melee in this slot called the Flying Guillotine. However, the only meat cleaver in the game is an iconic one that can't be thrown. I don't know what that's all about. If you want, you could substitute it with another throwable like a Tomahawk or Claw, which gives you a nice takedown option for silent engagements. From the melee slot, we are obviously going to use the baseball bat. In TF2, the Scout surprisingly holds the bat with one hand, so I guess you could substitute it with any of the other one-handed melee items in the game. But since bats are available, why bother? So now that we know what weapons we're going to use, let's take a look at the skill tree. To sum up, we're going to be maxing out Body, Reflex, and Cool. I'm not going to go in depth into every perk here as that would take way too long. This is just a simple template of things you can select. Since you can freely refund perk points, this part of the build has the most room for experimentation. The body tree contains perks that improve shotguns and blunt weapons, as well as perks that improve health and regen. The reflex tree is pretty self-explanatory. Scout is a highly mobile character, and this is where all the mobility perks are, such as air dash. You at least want to get this to level 9 so you can get ground dashing. However, if you don't find as much value in air dashing, you can prioritize the other trees, including tech, which I'll get to in a second. With Cool, the tree contains a bunch of pistol upgrades, so we'll take some of those. There are some perks that aid mobility, like the one that allows you to sprint while crouched. Cool also gives you some extra dialogue choices, which sort of fit with Scout's cocky attitude. Even after maxing those 3, you'd still be left with a ton of points, so I just dump it all into tech. This will let you get more cyberware, and you can get perks to improve your cyberware stats and the efficacy of your health items. It's not really in the spirit of Scout, but the alternative is letting the points sit there or putting them into intelligence, which would be useless since we aren't doing any net running stuff. Plus, Scout is widely accepted to be one of the dumbest TF2 mercs. You could even spec in the tech earlier, as it will help with opening doors and disabling cameras and mines. Maybe not realistic, but it sure as hell makes the game more fun. Alright, now let's talk cyberware. My school of thought here is that in order to have fun, we're gonna have to forego some of Scout's characteristics. In TF2, Scout is one of the squishiest classes, and if you avoid taking cyberware that makes you tankier, the game is gonna be hard and miserable. And what makes it even worse is that some cyberware only becomes available at higher tiers, and the iconic ones are only available at a Ripper Dock in Dogtown. Since we're using shotguns, this build requires a lot of close quarter combat of the loud variety. I would build things that improve health, stamina, and mobility. So here's what I ended up with. As you can see, there are quite a lot of iconic cyberware in here which are costly both in terms of capacity and cash. I have no recommended order, this is just what I'd eventually work my way towards. For frontal cortex, I have the Newton module and the Kerenzikov boost. The Newton module reduces cyberware cooldown whenever you take out an enemy, and the Kerenzikov boost helps with the actual Kerenzikov cyberware in the nervous system. The other stuff in this category mostly deals with RAM management for netrunner builds. There is an iconic version of the Newton module, but it has a massive capacity cost, so I would only use it if you're using a Sandevistan. For arms, I went with the standard Gorilla arms. I think that's pretty simple. It helps out early game, giving a slight bonus to body checks. For skeleton, I have titanium bones, the Rara Avis or Rora Avi, which is an iconic version of Parabellum, and epimorphic skeleton. You're pretty damn tanky with these, and if you feel like it makes the game too easy, you could swap them for something else. For nervous system, I use the Adreno trigger, which gives you 30% more movement speed for 30 seconds when you enter combat. This is an iconic version of the adrenaline converter. It's reflex attuned, and with reflex maxed out, you'll get an additional 60 seconds. So in total, that's a minute and a half of extra movement speed. More than enough time to wipe out the entire battlefield. If you want to go fast, then this is essentially the most important piece in this entire build. I also have Tyrosine Injector, which helps a bit with stealth and is only 8 capacity, so why not? Then I have the Kerenzikov, which allows you to aim and slow down time while sliding or dashing. I think the slowdown effect is pretty cool, but if you don't like it, I'd skip this cyberware as well as the ones in the frontal cortex. For integumentary system, I have this iconic Chitin, which is fucking crazy. Look how much armor it gives, and it gives health regen that scales with body. With body maxed, we get plus 200% health regen. Next, I took Painducer, which converts some damage taken into DOT, which is always handy. In place of this, you could do a pain editor instead, but I find DOT gives you a bit more leeway for healing. And finally, once you've spec'd enough in the tech, you can get the cellular adapter. Absolutely goated cyberware. Tons of bonuses, a ton of armor, and it only costs 8 capacity. A lot of the cyberware in this category are quite good for a scout build, and pieces like the carapace, nanoplating, and proxy shield are decent for the early and mid game. For the OS, I use the chrome compressor. Alternatively, you could rock with a Sandevistan the whole game. But I like having less things to worry about activating, so I prefer the extra cyberware capacity. For face, I took the Oracle, which is the best all-around Kiroshi optic. It basically lets you see everything. In the hand slot, I use the iconic Immovable Force, which is just god tier for weapons. For circulatory, I have Heal on Kill, Biomonitor, and Isometric Stabilizer. The latter is an iconic version of clutch padding that reduces stamina for all attacks instead of just guns. And finally, for the legs, you obviously go with reinforced tendons for the double jump. There actually is an iconic one that increases movement speed, which is an alternative if for whatever reason you don't like double jump. Once you reach the endgame with all of these, you are fast as shit and so tanky it doesn't even matter if you're missing all your shots. It's honestly a bit broken, but so much fun. So far this video has just been an info dump, but how about the actual gameplay? The roleplay unfortunately doesn't work out too well since V is much more serious and competent than Scout. Female V sometimes matches the sassy sarcasm and has a bit more of a bubbly and energetic personality, but the general demeanor is probably more fitting for a more serious merc like the Spy. There are some things you could do though, such as using the street kid life path since Scout is from Boston. You could also go to great lengths to help all the women in the game, including folding at various junctures. And Scout would probably wuss out of Cyber Psycho fights. I'm playing on hard difficulty, not a total walk in the park, but not super difficult either. When it comes to the gunplay, you can play it like the Scout where you do the run and gun style, prioritizing survival and creating separation to isolate enemies rather than fight them in large groups. Try to avoid long-range encounters, although if they're unavoidable you may have to get creative. One thing I didn't account for is the fact that dashing also uses stamina, so you probably want to keep dashing at a minimum if you're firing your weapons a lot. You can technically try to stealth your way through some engagements. In fact, a lot of missions and gigs encourage it. And in these scenarios, you're likely going to be relying on a thrown melee and silenced pistol. You won't be able to turn off cameras until you start speccing into tech, so until then you'll have to shoot them. As long as enemies don't see you do this, you won't trigger combat. They will be alarmed and start patrolling, but will eventually reset. And whether or not you want to use grenades is up to you. As I mentioned earlier, by late game you can become extremely tanky if you build for it. You should have good mobility and can literally fly around the battlefield shitting on everyone in sight. I normally prefer playing a stealth netrunner, where you can take out all enemies using quick hacks before even entering a room, so this was a nice change of pace. And that about does it for this Scout build. Like I've said throughout the video, there's lots of room for experimentation. If you find something you think works well, whether it be cosmetics or gameplay related, feel free to share it in the comments below. One thing's for sure is that no matter what Scout does, he's probably having a swell time doing it. That does it for this video, thanks for watching.